Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to impartially unpack the fascinating, incredibly complex journey of the man who founded Pakistan. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is, without a doubt, one of the 20th century's most consequential figures, and his evolution as a leader, well, it's a literal masterclass in shifting political strategy.
So, to really unravel this historical paradox, we have to ask the big question. How does a man who begins his political life passionately championing unity ultimately lead the charge for a partitioned subcontinent? To answer that, we're going to trace the extraordinary transformation of Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
Section 1. Early Life and Education.
To understand his ultimate political pivot, we first need to look at his roots, long before the idea of partition was even a whisper. Jinnah was born in 1876 in Karachi to a wealthy merchant family. But his world expanded dramatically in 1892. He transitioned rapidly from Karachi to London for a business apprenticeship, but he quickly abandoned business for the law. And get this, by 1895, at just 19 years old, he became the youngest British Indian to be called to the bar at Lincoln's Inn.
Now, what's really fascinating is how deeply Western political thought and culture shaped his early persona and his unyielding commitment to constitutionalism. His intellectual compass was totally set by 19th century British liberalism. We're talking figures like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. He was thoroughly exposed to progressive democratic ideals, and he fully embraced Western culture personally, completely abandoning local garb for impeccable Western-style suits. In fact, he owned over 200 of them and was actually famous for never wearing the same silk tie twice.
Section 2. The Brilliant Barrister. Returning to India, Jinnah didn't just immediately jump into revolutionary politics. Instead, he established himself as a formidable, highly paid legal mind in Bombay. Early in his career, he served temporarily as a presidency magistrate. When that term ended, he was offered the permanent post, which paid a really handsome 1,500 rupees a month. Well, he famously rejected it. He confidently declared he planned to earn that much in a single day, which, incredibly, he eventually did.
His courtroom demeanor totally reflected this uncompromising confidence and sharp logic. When admonished by a judge who told him to remember he wasn't addressing a third-class magistrate, Jinnah shot right back. "My lord, allow me to warn you that you are not addressing a third-class pleader." That wasn't just arrogance, you know. It was a deep-seated belief in his own intellectual rigor.
Section 3. Ambassador of Unity. This highly logical, constitutional mindset naturally bled into his early political career, when he started focusing on national issues. You see, initially, Jinnah dedicated himself to forging Hindu-Muslim unity to achieve self-government. He joined the Indian National Congress in 1904 as a moderate, and it's kind of wild to think about now, but he actually opposed separate electorates for Muslims at first, all because he wanted a totally united front against the British. His greatest early triumph was helping shape the 1916 Lucknow Pact, which successfully created a working cooperation between the Congress and the Muslim League. His efforts were so successful that he was famously bestowed this unifying title by a prominent political contemporary, Sarojini Naidu. She literally called him the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity.
However, the rise of Mohandas Gandhi highlighted a stark contrast in their approaches to independence, creating this inevitable friction. The contrast was absolutely stark. On one hand, you had Jinnah favoring impeccable Western clothing, primarily speaking English, and believing strictly in constitutional, legal means to achieve freedom. Then, on the other hand, you had Gandhi, wearing traditional Indian garb, utilizing local languages, and mobilizing the masses through civil disobedience. The philosophical clash really centered on this core concept, satyagraha, advocated by Gandhi. Jinnah fundamentally disagreed with this tactic. To his highly structured, legalistic mind, mass non-cooperation wasn't a reliable path to freedom. He actually viewed it as a recipe for political anarchy that totally bypassed the constitutional frameworks he so deeply respected.
Section 4. The Wilderness Years.
So after resigning from the Congress in 1920 over his complete disagreement with Gandhi's methods, Jinnah entered a period of serious political isolation. Disillusioned by factional fighting and the failure to secure constitutional protections for Muslims, he just stepped back. He stayed so true to his principles that he even rejected a British knighthood in 1925, simply because he preferred to be plain Mr. Jinnah. He tried to present a compromise known as the 14 Points to safeguard Muslim rights, but it completely failed to gain traction with other leaders. So he essentially took a sabbatical, relocating to London between 1930 and 1934 just to practice law.
Section 5. The Struggle for Pakistan.
But, as we know, the political landscape of the subcontinent was shifting rapidly. At the urging of figures like Liaquat Ali Khan, Jinnah closed his London practice and returned to India, only to be met with what historians call a traumatic turning point, the 1937 provincial elections. The outcome of these elections served as a massive historical catalyst that changed Jinnah's political philosophy forever.
The sheer political marginalization experienced during these elections shifted his strategy entirely away from unity. The Muslim League failed to win a majority in any Muslim-majority province, while Congress formed governments on the strength of general seats alone. Suddenly, non-Congress Muslims were faced with near-total political powerlessness. It became painfully clear to Jinnah that in a united democratic India, Muslims might simply become a permanent outvoted minority.
This massive ideological pivot was heavily guided by poet and philosopher Muhammad Iqbal, who became a crucial mentor to Jinnah. Iqbal basically convinced Jinnah to embrace a much deeper Muslim identity. He shifted Jinnah's rhetoric toward Islamic ideals of liberty, justice, and equality. And most importantly, he advocated for a separate state as the absolute only viable solution to protect the Muslim minority.
This ideological shift culminated right here in the Lahore Resolution of 1940. This was a formal political statement adopted by the All India Muslim League, officially calling for the creation of independent states for Muslims in British India. The demand for what would eventually become Pakistan was now formally on the table. Then, during the Second World War, the dynamics of power shifted yet again, as Jinnah tactically navigated the global conflict to elevate the Muslim League's status.
By taking a highly pragmatic approach, Jinnah frankly outmaneuvered his political rivals. While Congress demanded immediate independence and resigned their governments, which led to the imprisonment of their leaders, the League actively avoided obstruction of the British war effort. Jinnah used this crucial time to consolidate Muslim support all across the country. Because he kept the League functioning while Congress leaders were jailed, he ensured he was finally recognized by the British as an equal representative alongside Gandhi.
Late in the war, negotiations proved the wedge was permanent. At the 1944 Malabar Hill talks, they reached a total deadlock. Jinnah demanded an immediate Pakistan prior to the British departure, while Gandhi wanted a united independence first, saying the issue of partition could be decided later. The gap between them just could no longer be bridged. This is a really telling sentiment. Delivered in a speech a few years after Iqbal's death, he stated that if offered a choice between the works of Iqbal and the rulership of the Muslim state, he would actually prefer the former. He was placing his adopted political philosophy and the vision of a Muslim homeland far above his own personal power. As we conclude this explainer, we want to leave you to reflect on a rather profound question. Did Jinnah's rigid constitutionalism make the partition of the subcontinent an unavoidable historical necessity? You know, once he realized the constitutional frameworks he revered couldn't guarantee minority protections in a united India, his legal mind saw only one logical solution. It's a complex, incredibly unyielding legacy of a man who quite literally redrew the map of the world. Thank you so much for joining us to unpack this fascinating history today, and as always, keep learning.